Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Hey, it is, guys. We made it. Officially made it to the end of the war. It's all over.
It's all over. No more rebel yells.
All over here, but the painful years of Reconstruction that's about to follow for the next 15 years, too.
And then the out west, where the rebel sympathizers don't want to accept the fact that it's over. Which we probably don't want to hear too much about.
New America officially beginning here.
Yep.
1860s. We're going to wrap it up. Continue off of last week's Battle of West Point. We're going to do the accompanying Battle of Columbus, Georgia. We'll go to Anderson. And then the official last battle was Palmito Ranch. Yeah, Columbus. There's a debate between Columbus and Palmito Ranch, which one was actually the last battle. We'll see why in Palmito Ranch. 'Cause technically, the Confederates were no more when Palmito Ranch came by, so some included as a post-war action. But nevertheless, that's usually where it's marked at the end. We'll start off with the Battle of Columbus in Georgia, April 16th, 1865. It was the last conflict in the Union campaign through Alabama and Georgia, which is known as Wilson's Raid.
Yep.
After the Union victory in the Battle of Nashville, 14th to the 16th, 1864 of December. Weird way of saying that. Major General George Thomas ordered Major General James Wilson to march into the heart of the Deep South, destroy the major Confederate supply centers at Selma and Columbus.
Okay.
Selma, Alabama, Columbus, Georgia.
Right.
Wilson left Gravelly Springs, Alabama, March 22nd, 1865, headed for Selma, which was a major manufacturing and supply center. That Battle of Selma fought April 2nd, which was... We did that about almost 2 months ago now. It was against the leadership of Lieutenant General Nathan Bedford Forrest, whose men were hopelessly outnumbered by the Union troops.
Yeah.
The battle took place on the same day as the Confederate capital, Richmond, fell to the Army of the Potomac.
Ooh-wee. Some on my bitch, right? Well, General Forrest managed to inflict heavy casualties on the attackers. But Wilson's raiders finally broke through the defenses, and they captured Selma by about 7 p.m. Wilson's men destroyed all military supplies and looted the city before moving on. Bastards.
You gotta do what you gotta do.
You don't. April 9th, 1865. General Robert E. Lee, as we all know, surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at the Appomattox Courthouse. Confederate General Joe Johnston's army, still intact at this very time, as were the armies in Alabama and Mississippi, and in the Trans-Mississippi Theater. Also, because of the lack of communications, General Wilson was not even aware of Lee's surrender, and he continued on with his raids.
April 12th, Wilson's men marched into the former Confederate capital of Montgomery, Alabama, encountering token resistance from the Confederates. Wilson's next target was the manufacturing city of Columbus, Georgia, which is the last surviving supply city in the South.
Wait, when was Montgomery the capital of
It still is.
the Confederate?
Former Confederate capital. It was before Richmond, remember?
Oh, right.
It's the capital of Alabama.
Okay.
Columbus was the second only to Richmond in providing the industrial support for the war, and Richmond had been taken, obviously. Columbus was located on the Chattahoochee River, where there was a major naval construction facility.
Damn right.
A brand new ironclad, the CSS Muskogee, which was it was docked at Columbus, waiting to be completed. No more. Well, as we all know, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in Washington on Good Friday the 14th. He died the next day, but Wilson had not yet learned of this either.
The old Rebs in Columbus were well aware that Wilson's 13,000 men were on the way. Confederate Major General Howell Cobb had been placed in charge of whatever forces he could gather, and he did his very best to prepare to defend Columbus as best as he can, hoping that they can get at least some sort of a victory, right? He probably don't even know that Lee surrendered by now.
I think that would be going around the South at this point, wouldn't it be?
Cobb had about 3,500 men in his forces, most of them Georgia and Alabama Home Guard units and civilian volunteers. 16th April, 1865. Columbus newspapers warned citizens to leave that town since a Union attack was imminent. The public is hereby notified of the rapid approach of the enemy, but assured that the city of Columbus will be defended to the last. Judging from the experience, it is believed that the city will be shelled. Notice is, therefore, given to all non-combatants to move away immediately.
Well, look at you guys, huh? Cobb decided to defend the city on the western, which is the Alabama side of the Chattahoochee, in the town of Girard, which is now known as Phoenix City. There, the Confederates used trenches, breastworks, and earthen forts that had been partially built earlier in the war.
All right.
Now their completion became imperative. Gotta get this done, guys. What are we waiting for? Main objective was to defend the two covered bridges that connected Girard to Columbus. Cobb had the advantage of knowing that Wilson would have to concentrate on these two narrow locations in order to capture the city. Cobb also wanted to keep the high ground and Girard out of Wilson's clutch, lest he have a convenient perch to bombard Columbus.
I bet he did. Isn't that Ty Cobb's people?
Probably. I wouldn't doubt it.
In addition to preparing...
He's the most racist baseball player to ever play.
In addition to preparing strong fortified positions on the high ground in Girard, on the west side of Chattahoochee, Cobb, he ordered the base of the bridges to be wrapped in cotton and doused with turpentine. In the event that the Confederates were unable to fend off Wilson's raiders, they could, as a last resort, burn the bridges to deny Wilson's troops easy access to Columbus. The bridges were designed by Horace King. He's a master builder and legislator. Cool. 1807, King was born into slavery, but he earned his freedom and became one of the most respected bridge builders in the South. Fantastic. Good for him. Affectionately known as Horace, the Bridge Builder King, and the Prince of Bridge Builders. He emerged from the Civil War as a legislator in the state of Alabama.
Look at you, guy.
Fantastic.
Well, between 1:30 and 2 p.m. Easter morning, or Easter afternoon,
Right.
April 16th, Wilson's raiders arrived at Girard and the fighting began. Wilson also sent a detachment north of Columbus to West Point. They wanted to cross the Chattahoochee River there. West Point was defended by the garrison at Fort Tyler, which is the Battle of West Point, and Columbus took place on the same day. About 2 p.m., Union General Emory Upton's division launched an attack on the lower bridge, meeting very little resistance. They thought they would cross the bridge and take Columbus relatively easily. They said, this is it?
All right. Upton remarked, Columbus's eyes without a shot being fired. But this was a trap. Confederates removed the planks on the east side of the bridge to halt the Federals and allow the Confederates to burn the bridge filled with soldiers.
Oh, shit.
Wow. Recognizing the peril, Upton was forced to retreat. It seemed that the old Rebs might be able to defend Columbus after all. Wilson turned his attention to the upper bridge. As the sun began to set, General Robert Toombs, which is part of the Confederate, telegraphed Governor Joseph E. Brown of Georgia, telling him that a skirmish had occurred. He projected a decided fight the following day.
Well, to Toombs' surprise, General Wilson launched an all-out assault on the upper bridge at 8 p.m. after nightfall. He ordered General Winslow's brigade of the 3rd and 4th Iowa Cavalry Regiments to lead the attack. Colonel Frederick Benteen, he was ordered to lead the charge on the bridge. He later served under Custer at the Battle of Little Bighorn. Poor guy. Did he die there?
I hope not. Probably, right? They all died, didn't they?
Right. 1898.
Oh, he lived.
Look at him. How'd he do that?
He got the fuck out of there.
He was the other. Yeah.
Oh,
He relieved Marcus Reno's battalion and saved him from annihilation.
Right. He was like, nuh-uh. Damn, and he served in cavalry for another 12 years.
Good for him. Tremendous clash occurred near the entrance of the upper bridge, and Confederate John Pemberton was slashed by a saber.
Around 10 p.m., the Confederate defenses in Girard collapsed, and they attempted a retreat back across the Chattahoochee River into Georgia. Georgia? At that very same time, Winslow's brigade was eager to get across the upper bridge before it, too, might be set afire by the old rebels. Side by side, both Union and Confederate soldiers raced across the bridge to Columbus. It was too dark, however, for either to see who each other's was. Oh, wow. Though attempts were made to burn the bridge, the old Confederates did not even want to endanger their own troops.
Well, of course. General Robert Toombs commanded 2 cannon on the Georgia side of the upper bridge. They were loaded with canister and aimed to bring down those making their way through the covered bridge.
Uh-oh.
But knowing the soldiers running across the bridge were a mix of both armies, Toombs held his fire.
Too bad. Just take it out, man.
Might as well. 11 p.m., Wilson made his way across the bridge. As he crossed, his horse was shot and later died.
Aw, damn horse.
On the Columbus side of the bridge, Wilson took up headquarters in the house nearest to the bridge, which was the Mott House.
There, on Mott's Green, Colonel C.A.L. Lamar led a cavalry charge. Lamar was killed after refusing to surrender to a dismounted Union cavalryman.
Jeez.
Lamar was identified by General William Tecumseh Sherman erroneously as the last Confederate to die in the Civil War.
Well, no.
Lamar was previously known for his role in underwriting the illegal voyage of the Wanderer, which landed 409 Africans on Jekyll Island outside Brunswick, Georgia in 1858.
All right. Morning of April 17th, 1865, General Wilson ordered the destruction of all resources in Columbus that could aid the Confederate war effort. The ironclad CSS Muskogee, which was also known as the CSS Jackson, was burned and sunk. Why do that?
Right, so stupid.
And the Confederate naval facility, Port Columbus, was entirely destroyed.
Oh, you bastards.
Confederates scuttled the CSS Chattahoochee to prevent it from falling into Union hands. A review of the hospital records of the Battle of Columbus revealed the actual number of casualties incurred were considerably higher than previously reported.
I bet they were. While the initial Union casualty list reported by General Wilson indicated a loss of 25 men during the assault, the actual number was around 60. 10 of these men were killed in battle. 8 others died of their wounds. Most of these men are buried in Andersonville National Cemetery. The Confederate casualties, 151, of whom many are buried in Columbus at Linwood Cemetery. Another 1,600 Confederate prisoners were rounded up, incarcerated in a makeshift Union prison camp.
The Union Army entirely destroyed the Confederate manufacturing facilities in both Columbus, Georgia, and Girard, Alabama.
Wow.
Collateral damage on either side of the Chattahoochee River was rather extensive as well. For days after the battle, the flames that consumed the warehouses and factories in the Chattahoochee Valley marked the end of the war.
Yeah.
The Union Cavalry Vanguard departed Columbus on the 18th of April, said sayonara.
Adios, amigos. Immediately after victory at Columbus, Wilson led his raiders east to Macon, Georgia, and occupied that city without resistance. 10 days after the Battle of Columbus, the last great army of the Confederacy, under General Joseph E. Johnston, surrendered at Bennett Place, North Carolina, which we had last episode. The American Civil War had come to an end. Early May in Central Georgia, Wilson's band apprehended the two most wanted men in America.
Sure did.
Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederacy. Captain Henry Wirtz, commandant of the Confederate prison at Andersonville.
We will have a whole episode on Andersonville prison, as well as the one in the north that was like killed more, had a higher casualty rate than the actual war did.
Right. Sad news.
Like percentage, not more people died.
Yeah.
Several sources have held that this was the last battle of the war. Like we said, 1935, seeking support for a national battlefield park to be established here. The Georgia state government declared this to be, quote unquote, the last battle of the war between the states. Insofar as the surrender of the bulk of the Confederates, April 26th at Bennett Place, it marked the effective end of the war. The Battle of Columbus was the last battle of the Civil War. That's what they said.
Right.
President Andrew Johnson, who had succeeded Lincoln, declared the war over officially May 10th, 1865.
Wow.
Which plays into the Palmito Ranch, because that was after May.
Yeah.
May 10th.
Crazy. This was the day that Jefferson Davis was captured. Johnson characterized remaining resistors as no longer combatants, but fugitives. Oh. The Battle of Palmito Ranch took place on the 13th of May. Some claim that this was the last battle of the war, rejecting President Johnson's definition and preferring to refer to the Confederates there as organized forces of the Confederacy. Oh. The officers who led Union forces into battle insisted that Columbus was the last battle of the... Who gives a... Jeez.
Well, that's important.
I guess.
May 30th, 1865, Brevet Major General Emory Upton reported for his division in the Wilson Raid in the official records that the Battle of Columbus was the closing conflict of the war.
Cool.
1868, General Wilson gave a speech to a soldiers' reunion wherein he detailed the Battle of Columbus and concluded the last battle had been fought. 1913, Wilson wrote that there were no grounds left for doubting that Columbus was the last battle of the war.
No matter how many times you say it, bud.
General Edward Winslow wrote, I have always considered that engagement, by the number present and the results achieved, to be the final battle of the war. Colonel Theodore Allen wrote, it is true that there was some desultory fighting and scrapping after the Battle of Columbus, but nothing of sufficient size to entitle it to the name of a battle.
Okay, perfect. A bunch of skirmishes then, right? A movement to preserve the Girard-Columbus battlefield as a national park was active from the 1890s through the 1930s.
After 1930, they gave it a fuck.
The director of National Park Service, Arno B. Kammerer, rejected the proposal in 1934. In response, 1935, Georgia State Legislature passed a resolution identifying the battle as the last of the Civil War and calling again for a national battlefield park to be established there. 21st century, some people have begun a renewed effort to commemorate the battlefield as a park. Representatives of Auburn University posted an appeal in 2013 to help preserve Fort Gilmore, one of the earthwork redoubts on the Alabama side of the Chattahoochee River.
In 2015, Columbus State University professor Virginia Causey addressed the topic of last battle status in an article in the local Ledger-Inquirer paper. She suggested that this status was based on myth, according to a 45-page report, which was prepared by the Department of the Interior in 1934. 2015, Daniel Bellware rebutted her account in this article, in his article, How Columbus Lost the Last Battle of the Civil War.
Wow. Bellware said that the report had numerous factual errors, no date, no credits, no author, calling into question its attribution to the Department of the Interior. The report argues that the engagement in Columbus, which included major generals and thousands of combatants on both sides, does not rise to the level of a battle. However, it concludes that Palmito Ranch, a much smaller engagement with colonels commanding and a few hundred combatants, should be ranked as the last battle of the war.
Well, the report refers to former Confederate President Jefferson Davis's account in his book,
We don't care what this guy says.
The Rise and Fall of the Confederate Government. Bellware said that it might be more appropriate to rank the Battle of Columbus as the last major military engagement of the Civil War. to avoid the argument whether a particular engagement qualifies as a battle. A reenactment of this battle was filmed in Columbus, Georgia in March 1915 for the movie The Spirit of Columbus, 1865 to 1915. It's a lost film, no longer exists.
Wow.
Several battle scenes were incorporated into a story of romance, of course. The movie was screened during the Columbus Homecoming festivities, April 14th to the 17th, 1915, to commemorate the battle's 50th anniversary.
Fantastic.
Of being the last battle of the American Civil War.
Oh, wow.
All right, well.
So that's Columbus.
Yeah.
Gotta love it. Moving on, Battle of Anderson. It's a minor skirmish. Fought in Anderson County, South Carolina, 1st of May, 1865. The exact location of the battle is very unknown, but it definitely took place in Anderson County. Some historians believe the battle took place near the now I-85 and the Shiloh Methodist Church in the Piedmont area.
Piedmont, yeah.
Right, so you Shiloh Methodist churchgoers, just know you're standing on hollow grounds.
Okay.
27th of April, Union General George Stoneman ordered 3 brigades totaling 3,700 men to march from Asheville down the Saluda River to Belton or Anderson, and finally to head to Augusta in search of Confederate President Jefferson Davis. After Stoneman gave those orders, he returned to his headquarters in Knoxville. He's going back to Tennessee. He left behind some units under the command of Simeon B. Brown.
Well, May 1st, the Union forces arrived in Anderson County. After the Union Army arrived, they looted homes and businesses from Pendleton to Anderson. They looted and disposed of 300 bottles of wine.
Why?
While in Anderson, they want to get drunk. While in Anderson, Union soldiers killed a teenager named William Mackenzie Parker after he pointed a gun at the soldiers. Well, don't know that.
Wow.
Union Army also hung 2 men, Henry Winthrop and A.P. Carter.
Son of a bitch.
Later that day, a group of Confederate cadets from the South Carolina Military Academy attacked the Union forces. Confederates repulsed a small group of Union soldiers who were intending to burn down a railroad bridge on the Saluda River.
Wow. Good for them, right? Meanwhile, some Union cavalry were attacked by a group of Confederate soldiers from Pendleton. Due to the Confederate victory, a man named Daniel Brown, who was being executed by the Union Army, he was rescued. 2nd of May, Union Army publicly tortured 3 men, hoping that they could reveal the location of the rumored Confederate gold.
Oh, fuck off, dude.
Also on the 2nd of May, another group of 2,050 Union soldiers arrived. However, the Union Army in Anderson was unable to even capture Jefferson Davis, as Davis surrendered earlier and was captured in Georgia on the 10th of May.
Yes, he was. All right, folks, officially, last battle of the war, which is the Battle of Palmito Ranch, also known as the Battle of Palmito Hill. It was fought May 12th and the 13th on the banks of the Rio Grande, east of Brownsville, Texas, and a few miles from the seaport of Los Brazos de Santiago at the southern tip of Texas. After July 27th, 1864, the Union Army withdrew most of the 6,500 troops deployed to the lower Rio Grande Valley, including Brownsville, which they had occupied since November 2nd, 1863. Confederates were determined to protect the remaining ports, which were essential for cotton sales to Europe and the importation of supplies. Well, you're in America now, so you could still use those ports.
Right. The Mexicans across the border tended to side with the Confederates because of the lucrative cotton export trade. Beginning in early 1865, the rival armies in South Texas honored a gentleman's agreement, as they saw no point in further hostilities between them. Union Major General Lew Wallace.
Lew Wallace, isn't he one that fake pardoned Billy the Kid?
Lew Wallace. Possible.
Yeah.
Well, he proposed a negotiated end of hostilities in Texas to Confederate Brigadier General James Slaughter, and met with Slaughter and his subordinate Colonel Ford at Port Isabel on March 11th, or the 12th, and 12th probably.
Right.
Despite Slaughter's and Ford's agreement that combat would prove tragic, Slaughter's superior, Confederate Major General John Walker, he rejected the ceasefire in a scathing exchange of letters with Wallace. Ooh.
Despite this, both sides honored a tacit agreement not to advance on the other without prior written notice.
Oh, wow.
A brigade of 1,900 Union troops commanded by Colonel Robert B. Jones of the 34th Indiana Veteran Volunteer Infantry. They were on blockade duty of the port of Brazos, Santiago, which was at the mouth of the present-day ship channel of the port of Brownsville.
Okay.
The 400-man 34th Indiana was an experienced regiment that had served in the Vicksburg campaign.
Oh, fantastic.
And was reorganized in December 1863 as Veteran Regiment.
Oh.
Composed entirely of veterans from several other regiments whose original enlistments had expired.
Oh, that's
They're like,
nice.
you guys did the war well. Go down there with no fighting. You'll still
Right.
get your army pay and be good, dude.
Fantastic. 34th Indiana deployed to Los Brazos de Santiago on the 22nd of December, 1864. replacing the 91st Illinois Volunteer Infantry, which returned to New Orleans. The brigade also included the 87th and 62nd United States Colored Infantry Regiments, which had a combined strength of 1,100 men. Shortly thereafter, General Walker rejected the armistice proposal. Colonel Jones resigned from the Army to return to Indiana.
He's up to this.
He was replaced in the regiment by Lieutenant Colonel Robert Morrison, and at Los Brazos de Santiago by Colonel Theodore H. Barrett, commander of the 62nd commander of the 62nd Colored Troops. The 30-year-old Barrett had been an Army officer since 1862, but he had yet to see any combat. Oh, wow.
Anxious for a higher rank, he volunteered for the newly raised Colored Regiments and was appointed in 1863 as colonel of the 1st Missouri Colored Infantry.
Oh, wow.
March 1864, the regiment became the 62nd Colored Troops Regiment.
This dude's trying to be Colonel Shaw.
Well, Barrett contracted malaria in Louisiana that summer, and while he was on convalescent leave, the 62nd was posted to Los Brazos de Santiago. He then joined there February of 1865.
Wow. Well, as usual, historians got to put their stupid noses in it. They still debate why this engagement at Palmito Ranch took place. Lee had surrendered to Grant, triggering a series of formal surrenders in other places throughout the country. The Confederate and Union officers in Brownsville also knew that Lee had surrendered, effectively ending the war. Soon after the battle, Barrett's detractors claimed he desired a little battlefield glory before the war ended altogether.
He was a selfish little...
Right, and he didn't get it, though.
Well, others have suggested that Barrett needed horses for the 300 unmounted cavalrymen in his brigade, and he decided to take them from his enemy.
You can't be a horse thief.
Well, you can if you're in the Army.
Yeah,
Louis Schuler, in his 1960 pamphlet, The Last Battle in the War Between the States, May 13th, 1865, Confederate force of 300 defeats 1,700 Federals near Brownsville, Texas. That asserts that Brigadier General Egbert Brown of the U.S. Volunteers had ordered the expedition to seize as contraband 2,000 bales of cotton stored in Brownsville and sell them for his own profit. But Brown was not even appointed to command at Brazos Santiago until later in May. So what the fuck are you getting at, Schuler?
Yeah, come on, Schuler. According to historian Jerry Thompson, who gives a fuck? He says, what was at stake was honor and money. With a stubborn reluctance to admit defeat, Ford asserted that the dignity and manhood of his men had to be defended, having previously proclaimed that he could never capitulate to a mongrel force of abolitionists, Negroes, plundering Mexicans, and perfidious renegades. Perfidious renegades. Ford was not about to surrender to invading black troops. Even more important was the large quantity of Richard King and Mifflin Kennedy's cotton stacked in Brownsville, waiting to be sent across the river to Matamoros. If Ford did not hold off the invading federal force, the cotton would be confiscated by the Yankees and thousands of dollars lost.
Well, Union Lieutenant Colonel David Branson...
How are they selling it? Getting Confederate dollars or American dollars?
I assume American dollars. I'm sure they're getting American dollars for what the Confederates were anyways. Right. Union Lieutenant Colonel David Branson wanted to attack the Confederate encampments commanded by Ford at White and Palmito Ranches near Fort Brown outside of Brownsville. Branson's Union force consisted of 250 men of the 62nd Colored Troops in 8 companies and 2 companies of the 2nd Texas Cavalry Battalion. That's a U.S. federal force. The 300-man 2nd Texas, like the earlier formed 1st Texas, was composed largely of Texans of Mexican origin who remained loyal to the United States. They moved from Brazos, Santiago to the mainland. At first, Branson's expedition was successful, capturing 3 prisoners and some supplies, although it failed to achieve the desired surprise.
During the afternoon, rebel forces under Captain William Robinson counterattacked with less than 100 cavalry, driving Branson back to White's Ranch, where the fighting stopped for the night. Both sides sent for reinforcements. Ford arrived with 6 French guns and the remainder of his cavalry force, which is a total of 300 men, while Barrett came with 200 troops of the 34th Indiana in 9 under-strength companies.
The next day, Barrett started advancing westward, passing a half-mile to the west of Palmito Ranch, with skirmishers from the 34th Indiana deployed in advance. Ford attacked Barrett's force as it was skirmishing with an advanced Confederate force along the Rio Grande, about 4 p.m. He sent a couple of companies with artillery to attack the Union right flank and the remainder of his force into a frontal attack. After some confusion and fierce fighting, the Union forces retreated toward Boca Chica.
Barrett attempted to form a rear guard, but the old rebel artillery prevented him from rallying a force large enough to do so. During his retreat, which lasted until 14th of May, 50 members of the 34th Indiana's Rear Guard Company, 30 stragglers, 20 dismounted cavalry, all surrounded in a bend of the Rio Grande and captured. The battle was recorded as a Confederate victory.
Sure is. Fighting in this battle involved Caucasian, African American, Hispanic, and Native American troops. Reports of shots from the Mexican side, the sounding of a warning to the Confederates of the Union approach, the crossing of Imperial cavalry into Texas, and the participation by several among Ford's troops are unverified, despite many witnesses reporting shooting from the Mexican shore. In Barrett's official report of August 10, 1865, he reports that 115 Union casualties, which is 1 killed, 9 wounded, 105 captured.
Wow.
Confederate casualties were reported as 5 or 6 wounded, with none killed.
Wow.
Is that the first ever battle when nobody was killed?
Wow.
Well, on one side.
Right. Historian and Ford biographer Stephen Oates. He concludes that Union deaths were much higher, probably around 30, many of whom drowned in the Rio Grande or were attacked by French border guards on the Mexican side.
French.
He, likewise, estimated Confederate casualties at approximately the same number.
Okay.
Using court-martial testimony and post-returns from Brazos, Santiago, historian Jerry Thompson of Texas A&M International University, he determined the 62nd Colored Troop incurred 2 killed and 4 wounded. 34th Indiana had 1 killed, 1 wounded, 79 captured. 2nd Cavalry Texas Battalion had 1 killed, 7 wounded, 22 captured, totaling 4 killed, 12 wounded, and 101 captured. Private John Williams of the 34th Indiana was the last fatality during the battle at Palmito Ranch, likely making him the final death of the entire Civil War.
John J. Williams, what a way to remember, huh?
Of the Americas.
Well, President Davis was captured, like we said, May 10th, marking the end of the war. In addition, that day, Andrew Johnson declared armed resistance virtually at an end. Historian James McPherson joins other historians, including that the war ended when the Confederate government ended. Confederate General Edmund Kirby Smith officially surrendered all Confederate forces in the Trans-Mississippi Department June 2nd, except those under the command of Brigadier General Chief Stan Wadey in the Indian Territory. Stan Wadey himself of the 1st Cherokee Mounted Rifles indeed surrendered June 23rd, which became the last Confederate general to surrender. He did that in Dokesville, Indian Territory. On the same day, Andrew Johnson ended the Union blockade of the southern states.
Oh, fantastic. Many senior Confederate commanders in Texas, including Smith, Walker, Slaughter, and Ford,
It's a hell of a law firm.
and many troops with their equipment fled across the border to Mexico. Wanting to resist capture, they may also have intended to ally with French imperial forces, or even with the Mexican forces under deposed President Benito Juarez. The military division of the Southwest, after June 27th, the division of the Gulf, commanded by Major General Philip Sheridan, occupied Texas between June and August.
Sheridan, huh? Consisting of the 4th Corps, the 8th Corps, the African American 25th Corps, and 2 4,000-man cavalry divisions commanded by Brigadier General Wesley Merritt and Major General George Custer, had aggregated a 50,000-man force on the Gulf Coast and along the Rio Grande to pressure the French intervention in Mexico and garrison the Reconstruction Department of Texas.
All right.
In July 1865, Barrett faced charges of disobedience of orders, neglect of duty, abandoning his colors, and conduct prejudicial to good order and military discipline against Morrison for actions in the battle, resulting in the latter's court-martial.
Oh, son of a bitch. Rebel Colonel Ford, who had returned from Mexico at the request of Union General Frederick Steele to act as a parole commissioner for disbanding Confederate forces, he appeared as a defense witness and assisted in absolving Morrison of responsibility for the defeat at Palmito Ranch.
Look at that.
The history of this engagement provides accounts of the roles of Hispanic Confederate veterans and of the treatment of Confederates in South Texas of black prisoners of war. Hispanic Confederates served at Fort Brown in Brownsville and on the field of Palmito Ranch. Colonel Santos Benavides, who was the highest ranking Hispanic in either army, he led between 100 and 150 Hispanic soldiers in Brownsville in May of 1865.
And some of the 62nd Colored Regiment were also taken into the Battle of Palmito Ranch, yes. They had been led to believe that if captured, they would either be shot or returned to slavery. They were agreeably surprised when they were paroled and permitted to depart with the white prisoners.
Wow.
Several of the prisoners were from Austin and the vicinity. When they were assured they would be treated as prisoners of war, there was no disposition to visit upon them a mean spirit of revenge.
Right.
This said by Colonel John Salmon Ford, May 1865. When Colonel Ford surrendered his command following the campaign of Palmito Ranch, he urged his men to honor their paroles. He insisted that the Negro had a right to vote.
Oh, not yet. Although officially most historians say this was the last land action fought between the North and the South, some sources suggest that the battle on the 19th of May 1865 of Hobbdy's Bridge, located near Eufaula, Alabama, was the last skirmish between the two forces.
No.
Union records show that the last Northern soldier killed in combat during the war was Corporal John Skinner. Skinner! In this action. 3 others were wounded, also from the same unit, Company C, 1st Florida U.S. Cavalry.
But I don't know why it doesn't say it here, but it's confirmed that it wasn't an organized group of rebel soldiers that did it. It was a bunch of stragglers that jumped out and got them, so it doesn't count. Historian Richard Gardner stated in 2013 that May 10th, 1865, a confrontation took place at Palmito Ranch. There was no Confederacy in existence when the battle occurred. The ex-Confederates at Palmito Ranch were aware that Lee had surrendered and the war was over. What happened in Texas can only be understood as a post-war encounter between Federals and ex-Confederate outlaws.
Makes sense. The rebels won this engagement, though. But as there was no organized command structure, there has been controversy about the Union casualties. 1896, these same men had their pensions cut, although this was quickly rectified by an appeal to the Commissioner of Pensions.
What a bunch of dicks.
Right. The Assistant Secretary to the Commissioner overturned the pension cut, legally ruling the men as the last Union casualties of war. You bastards.
I'm trying to take it. Man. It doesn't matter if it was a battle officially in the Civil War. They were still part of the Army.
Right. 2nd of April, 1866, almost 1 full year after the surrender of Lee, President Johnson declared the insurrection at an end. Except in Texas.
Except in Texas.
That's still going on in Texas today.
Right.
There, a technicality concerning incomplete information of a new state government prevented declaring the insurrection over.
Right.
Johnson declared the insurrection at the end in Texas and throughout the United States on August 20th, 1866.
The area has remained relatively unchanged, with the marshy, windswept prairies almost the same as they were in 1865.
Fantastic.
The site is more than 5,400 acres in size and designated a National Historic Landmark in 1997. The area is indicated by a large highway marker telling the history of the engagement, which is installed on the Boca Chica Highway, which is Texas State Highway 4, near where Palmito Ranch originally stood. Civil War Trustee and its partners have acquired and preserved 3 acres of that 5,400 acres.
Fuck yeah, guys. Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
That's enough for a parking lot.
Right. That's it, guys.
There it is, boys.
Done with the war officially. Crazy.
Didn't work out.
Did not work out.
4.5 years of fighting for nothing.
Basically. The Federal's like, not gonna lie, you had us in the first half.
Right.
And after that, it was over with.
Yeah.
I have no fear. Just because the battles are over doesn't mean this podcast is over. They're like, everybody's like sighing right now. We'll be back. We're probably gonna take the rest of 2024 off. Is like a week, and then we'll be back after the new year to start. We'll be starting with the assassination of Lincoln, and then we'll start profiling.
We're going to be styling and profiling
all the generals, major generals, everybody that we can in this war that participated. So
any engagements,
events that took place that are significant, like we'll be talking about the prisons. So we'll have that. I mean, we'll have a bunch of stuff coming up later on in this. So this podcast is far from over. So yeah, we'll be back after the New Year. So Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we'll see you guys in January for more battles of the American Civil War. We are the Month of Michiganders. We
Dang.